the heart of this nation, under skies so blue,
there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true.
from the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe, conservative values in our souls, they're interweaved. With courage and with honor, we'll hold our ground for freedom, for tradition, in this land we found.
All right, so you guys sent us a ton of articles about Zelensky's trip to the U.S., and wow, this is a mess.
Yeah, it's a total disaster.
This meeting with President Trump went so badly that Zelensky was practically kicked out.
I know, right?
What even happened here?
Well, it's not just some little diplomatic oopsie, you know. This whole thing seems to show there are some serious problems.
Problems?
Yeah, not just between the U.S. and Ukraine.
Oh.
But maybe even problems within U.S. politics itself, you know, like between the parties.
Okay, so let's break this down for those who need a refresher.
Right.
Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, went to Washington to meet with President Trump.
Right.
And the plan was to sign this huge mineral deal.
Yep.
Everyone thought this was going to be a big turning point, maybe even help end the war with Russia.
Absolutely.
So remind us, what was in this deal that made it so important?
Well, the deal would give the U.S. access to all these minerals that Ukraine has.
Oh.
Like tons of valuable resources. Yeah. And on the surface, it seemed like a pretty good deal for both sides.
How so?
Well, Ukraine would get a bunch of economic support, right?
Right.
And their relationship with the U.S. would be stronger, and the U.S. would get access to all these important resources.
Okay, that makes sense.
Some people even thought that this deal could, you know, help stabilize the whole region.
Wow.
And maybe even, like, help make a peace agreement happen.
So Zelensky gets to the U.S., ready to sign, but then everything just explodes in the Oval Office.
It's crazy, right?
What exactly happened in that meeting?
From what these articles are saying, it seems like Zelensky just went rogue.
Rogue?
Yeah, he got all confrontational.
Really?
Started rejecting parts of the deal.
No way.
And some people are even saying he was trying to humiliate Trump.
Right there in the Oval Office.
Yeah.
Wow, talk about a bold move.
It's pretty shocking considering he was the one who came up with this whole deal in the first place, right?
Right. It makes you wonder what he was thinking.
Exactly. Remember, Zelensky was the one who pitched this deal.
Yeah.
He seemed to get Trump. You know, like he understood Trump's whole art of the deal thing.
Yeah.
But then he just, like, totally blew it up.
So maybe Zelensky just completely miscalculated?
Maybe.
But it seems like he lost a lot of political support because of this.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not just the deal that's falling apart, right?
Oh, not at all.
This messed up the relationship between the U.S. and Ukraine, even among people who really liked Zelensky.
Yeah, like Senator Lindsey Graham.
Oh, yeah. He was a big Zelensky supporter.
Huge supporter.
What do you say?
Well, after this whole mess, Graham basically said that Europe needs to step up and defend itself. Like, he was hinting that the U.S. can't keep doing everything.
Yikes. That's a big shift.
Right.
So Zelensky messed up big time.
Yeah.
Alienated some important people. The deal's a disaster.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, was there more going on here?
What do you mean?
Like, was Zelensky acting on his own? Or did someone else have a hand in this?
Well, that's where things get interesting.
Ooh, tell me more.
Okay, so this hot air article says that Zelensky met with some Democrats right before he met with Trump.
Democrats? Like who?
Yeah, people like Senator Chris Murphy.
Okay. And what happened in that meeting?
Well, the article claims that Senator Murphy told Zelensky to reject the deal.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
The Democrats told Zelensky to blow up the deal. Why would they do that?
I know, it's kind of crazy, right?
It makes zero sense.
Well, the article suggests that Murphy and the other Democrats saw this as a way to make Trump look bad.
Like how?
They wanted to bring back that whole Russia thing, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Trying to make it seem like Trump was working with Putin.
Wow. So they were willing to use Zelensky and Ukraine for their own political games?
That's what this article is saying, yeah.
Crazy.
And it claims that this whole plan backfired.
How so?
It put Zelensky in a really bad spot. And it actually made Trump look stronger.
That's wild.
It's a very messy situation.
So we've got this meeting that completely implodes. A mineral deal that's dead in the water.
Yep.
And Zelensky is in hot water with pretty much everyone.
Pretty much.
So what happens now? Did he try to fix things?
Well, he did try to do a little damage control. He went on the BBC and said he was still willing to sign the deal.
Really? After all that?
Yeah, no, it's hard to believe.
Doesn't seem very likely.
Right. And actually, this RedState article we have says something completely different.
What does it say?
They quote Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent as saying that the deal is absolutely off the table.
So Zelensky is trying to backpedal, but the damage might already be done.
Exactly.
He's lost key supporters. He's getting pressure from Europe to sign the deal.
Right.
And it seems like Trump has all the power now.
It does seem that way.
And to make things even worse, Frank Luntz, that pollster, posted some polls on X.
Oh, yeah, those unscientific polls, right.
Exactly.
But they usually give you a decent idea of how people are feeling.
Right. So what did these polls show?
Well, they show that public opinion has really shifted.
Against Zelensky.
Yeah, after that whole Oval Office mess. Most Americans were more angry at Zelensky than they were at Trump.
Wow. So Zelensky went from hero to villain just like that.
Pretty much.
That's got to be a PR nightmare for him.
For sure.
This kind of ties into that whole war fatigue thing we've been seeing, which that twitchy article talked about.
Exactly. The war has been going on for so long.
Yeah.
People are starting to question whether it's worth the cost, you know?
The cost in terms of money, resources.
Right. And the cost of Ukrainian lives.
And it seems like Zelensky's actions have just made people feel even more that way.
Definitely.
This is such a complicated situation.
It really is.
Zelensky went from being a hero to a villain in a lot of people's eyes.
It's true.
But where does this leave the war?
Yeah.
And what about the relationship between the U.S. and Ukraine?
Those are the big questions.
And that's what we're going to explore in the next part of this deep dive.
Can't wait.
Okay, so we've seen how this meeting just totally imploded.
Yeah, it's a mess.
This mineral deal is probably dead, and Zelensky is facing a ton of backlash.
Yeah, he really is.
So now what? Like, are there even any options left to try and end this war?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is.
And to be honest with you, the stuff we've read doesn't exactly paint a rosy picture.
You're telling me this twitchy article really dives into this whole idea of whether the U.S. can even keep supporting Ukraine forever.
It's a huge question, right?
It is.
And it's something people are really starting to debate.
Yeah.
You've got folks like Matt Yglesias.
Oh, yeah. He's a big name.
Yeah, he's saying that the U.S. has got the resources to keep this going.
Like, we can afford it.
Exactly. He's saying that sending military equipment, all that stuff, it's something we can sustain.
Okay, so that's one side of the argument.
Right. And then you have J.D. Vance.
Now, Vice President Vance.
Exactly. He's saying that this war just isn't sustainable. Not in the long run.
So he's taking the opposite view.
He is. He's really looking at the bigger picture, you know?
Like what?
Well, he's pointing out the cost of all of this.
I mean, yeah, wars are expensive.
Oh, absolutely. But he's not just talking about money and stuff.
What else then?
He's talking about Ukrainian lives, you know?
Right, the human costs.
Exactly. And he's asking some tough questions. Like,
What kind of questions?
like, what are we even trying to do in Ukraine? Are we ready to, like, really escalate this thing? And what is it going to cost the American people in the end? You know?
Man, it's so complicated.
It really is.
Feels like we're stuck between a rock and a hard place, you know?
I know what you mean.
Like, if we pull back, we might be abandoning Ukraine.
Yeah.
But if we go all in, it could get way out of control.
Absolutely. It's a tough spot to be in.
So given how badly Zelensky messed up, is there even a middle ground here?
Well, that's the thing, right? Zelensky has really limited his options.
By alienating Trump
Exactly.
and possibly losing the support of the U.S.
Yeah, he's kind of backed himself into a corner.
So what can he even do at this point? Is there any way he can fix this?
Well, he could try to bring back that mineral deal, but,
But what?
well, he'd probably have to accept terms that are way worse than what he had before.
Oh, I bet.
And even if he did that, who knows if the U.S. would even be interested anymore.
Yeah, especially with how public opinion has changed.
Right.
It seems like people in America are getting tired of this war.
Definitely.
So the mineral deal is probably not going to happen.
It's not looking good.
What else could he do?
Well, the other option is to try and find some other way to end the war. Maybe by, like, making concessions to Russia.
But wouldn't that be super risky for Zelensky?
Oh, yeah, big time.
I mean, he's been saying this is a fight for democracy and freedom and all that.
Right. And if he starts making concessions, it'll look like he's going back on his word.
People would see it as a betrayal.
Exactly. It could even make his own government unstable.
He's in a really tough spot.
Yeah, it's a lose-lose situation.
This whole thing just shows how political games and mistakes on the world stage can have these really terrible consequences.
It's a perfect example of that.
And what's even scarier is that all of this might actually be helping the people who want the U.S. to just withdraw from the world, you know?
Yeah, like isolationists.
Exactly. They want us to just stay out of everything.
That's a pretty scary thought, right?
It is. I mean, are we really at a point where the U.S. can't even manage its relationships with important allies like Ukraine?
That's a good question.
What does that say about our ability to handle even bigger problems like, you know, China?
That's a valid concern for sure.
This whole thing shows how fragile these international alliances are.
They really are.
And it shows how dangerous it can be when politicians put their own agendas ahead of what's best for everyone.
Absolutely. It's a wake-up call.
It feels like we're at a turning point, not just for Ukraine, but for the U.S. too.
I agree.
This whole thing has left us with so many questions like,
Like what?
well, what happens to Ukraine if the U.S. stops supporting them?
Yeah, that's a big one.
Can Europe really step up and take our place?
Good question.
And what does this all mean for, you know, the relationship between the U.S. and Europe?
Those are huge questions.
They are.
And unfortunately, we don't really have any clear answers.
That's true.
But these are questions we need to be thinking about.
We can't just ignore this stuff.
Exactly.
And that brings us to the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, sounds good.
We're going to explore some possible scenarios for the future
Right.
and what those scenarios might mean for the U.S., for Ukraine, and for the whole world. All right, so we've been talking about this crazy situation with Zelensky, the U.S., and the war in Ukraine.
Yeah, a lot to unpack.
We're kind of standing at the edge of a cliff here, you know, like every way forward seems risky.
It really does.
If this mineral deal is really off the table, how do we even end this war? And what's it going to cost?
Well, the articles we've looked at, they don't offer any easy solutions.
That's for sure.
It's kind of bleak, to be honest.
Yeah, every potential solution seems to create new problems.
Exactly. Like, imagine Zelensky just digs his heels in and refuses to negotiate.
Oh, man.
This war could drag on for years, you know.
It's a scary thought.
More lives lost, cities destroyed. It's hard to even think about.
And even if Zelensky does agree to negotiate,
Right. Even then.
what's he willing to give up? Will Russia even accept anything less than total victory?
That's the big question, isn't it? Like, what does Putin even want? What's his end game?
No one really knows.
It's a mystery.
But even if they could somehow agree on something, I bet Ukraine would have to make some really painful concessions.
Oh, absolutely.
And then there's the whole question of the U.S. role in all of this.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Like, even if we keep sending some help, will it actually make a difference?
Or are we just going to make things worse?
Right. Or will we just be like dragging this whole thing out without changing the outcome?
That's the dilemma, isn't it?
It is.
We want to help Ukraine. It's like a moral obligation.
Right.
But we also don't want to risk making this whole thing even bigger.
Like it could escalate out of control.
Exactly. And maybe even drag other countries into it.
That's a scary thought.
It is. We're talking about really high stakes here.
Man, it all just feels so overwhelming, you know?
I know what you mean.
Like, what can one person even do? This is a global crisis.
I think the first step is to remember that this isn't just some, abstract political thing happening far away.
Right.
We're talking about real people's lives here.
Yeah, this war is a tragedy.
It is.
It really shows you how devastating war can be.
The human cost is immense.
And it shows how fragile peace is.
It really does.
And how hard it can be to achieve.
Yeah, and how sometimes to get peace, you have to make some really tough choices.
You have to be willing to compromise.
Absolutely. There's rarely a perfect solution.
And this is where I think we all have a responsibility.
As citizens.
Yeah, we need to stay informed. We need to talk about these things.
Have these conversations.
Exactly. And we need to hold our leaders accountable.
And make sure they're acting responsibly.
Right, and ethically.
Because the fate of Ukraine, and maybe even the whole world, is at stake.
This whole thing has been such a roller coaster.
It really has.
We've seen alliances broken, political maneuvering gone wrong.
Absolutely.
And it all just highlights how complicated these global issues are.
They really are, and how important it is for us to be informed and engaged,
To try and make a difference however we can.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
You Democrats, bloated bureaucrats, like a New York sewer rat. Go away.